The prince's burden. In the grand kingdom of Varanapura, there lived a young prince named Jayasena. He had wealth, power, and admiration, yet his heart carried a deep sorrow. His mother, Queen Anika, had passed away when he was a child, and though years had passed, the emptiness remained. His father, King Dharan, urged him to embrace his royal duties, but Jayasena felt a void within, an ache that no gold or conquest could fill. One evening, the prince stood on the palace balcony, gazing at the moonlit sky. His heart whispered, "Why does suffering never leave me?" He sought answers in pleasures, festivals, feasts, and luxuries, but none brought peace. One day, an old sage named Arav appeared at the palace gates. He was known as a disciple of the great Buddha. The prince, hearing of his wisdom, invited him for a conversation. "O wise one," Jayasena said, "I have everything a man could desire, yet I suffer endlessly. Why?" The sage smiled gently. "You suffer, dear prince, because you seek peace in impermanent things. Would you be willing to seek the true cause of your pain?" Jayasena nodded, and the sage whispered, "Then leave the palace and walk the path of wisdom." The journey begins that very night. Jayasena shed his royal robes and disguised himself as a simple traveler. He walked out of the palace gates, stepping away from the world of luxury and into the unknown. His journey led him to a small village where he met a woman named Surya, who wept near a dying banyan tree. "Why do you cry, mother?" he asked. "My son was taken by a fever last night," she sobbed. "Without him, my life has lost all meaning." Jayasena's heart ached for her. "I, too, have lost someone dear. I know this pain." The woman looked into his eyes. "Then tell me, young traveler, does suffering ever end?" Jayasena had no answer. He only knew his own pain, and hers seemed just as deep. Seeking answers, he continued his journey. The first truth. Jayasena arrived at a monastery where monks meditated in perfect stillness. He approached the head monk and said, "I wish to learn how to end suffering." The monk led him to a simple clay bowl filled with water. "Look into this bowl, young traveler. What do you see?" Jayasena peered in. "My reflection." The monk stirred the water with a stick. "Now, what do you see?" "My reflection is distorted." The monk nodded. "Your mind is like this water. Suffering comes from within, not from the world outside. If your mind is disturbed, you see everything through pain. But if your mind is still, peace arises." Jayasena thought deeply. "I have been searching for peace outside, but perhaps it is within me." The monk continued, "The Buddha taught the first noble truth, dukkha, suffering exists. Everyone experiences pain, loss, and sorrow. Accept this truth, and you take the first step toward freedom." Jayasena bowed in gratitude and continued his journey, carrying this wisdom in his heart. The cause of pain. One day, he came across a merchant grieving over his lost fortune. "I was once the richest man in the city," the merchant lamented. "Now, I have nothing." Jayasena sat beside him and asked, "Why do you suffer?" "Because I have lost what was mine." Jayasena pondered. Was it truly yours? If something can be taken away, was it ever permanent? The merchant stared at him in silence. Jayasena recalled the second noble truth, samadaya, suffering arises from attachment and desire. He understood now that his own pain came from clinging to his past, just as the merchant clung to his lost wealth. That night, under a Bodhi tree, he meditated. If suffering comes from attachment, what happens when we let go? The path to freedom. Jayasena's journey led him to an old man named Bodhi, who lived in solitude. He had once been a great warrior, but now he spent his days in peace. "Wise one," Jayasena asked, "how do I free myself from suffering?" Bodhi smiled. "Follow the path that Buddha taught." He handed Jayasena a scroll, inscribed with the Eightfold Path. 1. Right understanding, see the world as it truly is. Right thought, let go of hatred and desire. Right speech, speak words of truth and kindness. Right action, do good and cause no harm. Right livelihood, earn a living honestly. Right effort, be diligent in your practice. Right mindfulness, be aware of the present moment. Right concentration, meditate to gain wisdom. Jayasena read each step carefully. He realized that he had spent his life looking for a way to escape suffering, but the path was not to escape, it was to transform. He stayed with Bodhi for months, practicing meditation and mindfulness. Slowly, his pain lost its grip on him. He no longer clung to his mother's absence but honored her memory with love. He no longer sought pleasure to numb his suffering but found joy in the simplicity of the present moment. Returned to the kingdom years later, Jayasena returned to Varanapura, no longer a sorrowful prince, but a man of wisdom. The people marveled at his transformation. His father, King Naran, saw the peace in his eyes and embraced him. "My son, you left in search of answers. Have you found them?" Jayasena smiled. "Yes, father. Suffering exists, but we do not have to be ruled by it. By letting go of attachment and walking the path of wisdom, peace is possible." The king, touched by his son's wisdom, asked, "Will you help guide our people?" And so, Jayasena became a ruler unlike any before. He ruled not with power, but with compassion. He shared the wisdom of the Buddha, helping his people find peace even in hardship. His kingdom flourished, not because it was without suffering, but because its people had learned to rise above it. Epilogue. The light within. One evening, as Jayasena stood on the same palace balcony where he once despaired, he looked at the moonlit sky. He no longer asked, "Why do I suffer?" Instead, he smiled and whispered, "Suffering is a part of life, but wisdom is the light that guides us through it." And so, the prince who had once been lost in sorrow became a beacon of wisdom, showing others that true peace comes not from avoiding suffering, but from understanding and transforming it.